everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Kings Chat. It's Lena Washington and Sean Cunningham joining you from our respective workplaces in Sacramento. We are coming off a Kings loss to snap their winning streak at 4 games, season-long streak at that. But now we look ahead to Friday when the Orlando Magic come to town, the second of a 5-game homestand. Sean, that game against the Sixers was pretty competitive, but of course, shots weren't falling like the Kings wanted them to, and at the free throw line, they could have done a little bit better to help them remedy that loss, an 8-point loss, 119-111, the final from Tuesday's game. But what did you like? What did you not like from that game, and what are you anticipating with this crucial homestand coming up?
Well, we kind of talked about it last week about how, for some reason, home court, and even without fans, even when they did have fans, home court just really hasn't treated the Kings terribly kindly. I mean, they've actually found more magic on the road for whatever reason. But I was pretty impressed with the way the Kings responded against the Sixers. I mean, I think what really stood out to me was just how freaking good the Sixers are. We knew they were an upper echelon team in the NBA and in the Eastern Conference, but they might be one of the best teams that's probably not a stretch, but for me, it just seems like they are a lot better than what I remember from last year. Tobias Harris is playing at such a high level. Joel Embiid is an MVP caliber player right now. I just really like the way that team is built and the way I find myself watching them a lot on my own time throughout this young season. And to see the Kings be able to not only compete with them and match their physicality, because that's one of the teams that really is about one of the most physical teams that you're going to see in the NBA, just how big they are. And for a team that we were knocking as being soft, and for the most part, I still am. I don't think I'm going to sit there and say that they've totally turned a corner in that, but to see the way that they've competed at that level has been really impressive. And like you mentioned, as you mentioned, they were not hitting from the perimeter in the second half. I think Marvin Bagley accounted for like 2 of the maybe 3 or 4 threes that they had in that second half. So to go cold at the perimeter and still be able to match that physicality and that intensity, I think is a pretty huge feather in their cap. I mean, even though they lost that game, it's one of those kind of Pyrrhic victories where you look at it and go, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Like, you should be getting your heads kicked in by this Sixers team, and you didn't. So kudos to them. It was a hard-fought game. It shouldn't derail any of the momentum that they've had over these past couple weeks.
Yeah, and you mentioned the length and the size of the Sixers team, obviously, with Joel Embiid there. But the way the Kings have competed against pretty again, upper echelon teams. The Sixers have the best record in the league right now, but they beat Boston, Denver, and LA, the Clippers, on the road, no less, within the last week and a half. So pretty impressive physicality that we've seen from the Kings. Of course, we were not too long ago talking about the lack of physicality, the lack of defense, the lack of fight, particularly in the second half with this team. And you mentioned Tobias Harris. I mean, he came alive in the fourth quarter. We've seen fourth quarter De'Aaron Fox, fourth quarter Tyrese Halliburton, but the way that Tobias Harris kind of made this game unreachable for the Kings at some point down the stretch in the fourth quarter really kind of helped this Sixers team come away with the victory at Golden One Center. But now we have the Magic coming. The Kings already picked up a win about 2 or 3 weeks ago in Orlando over this team. But again, they are 12-12. They're at the 500 mark as we come down to the final stretch of this first half. Typically, we'd be gearing up for the All-Star break at this point, but that's still about 3 weeks away. And this is kind of the time that we've seen this team fall apart with the trade deadline, with this tough schedule coming up after this 5-game homestand. They have an East Coast swing to close out the first half. And again, they're facing some tough teams. They'll get the Nets for the first time. And they're loaded, as we know. But what are you most encouraged by? I'm definitely encouraged by the fight and the pride that this team is taking. We've talked about Richaun Holmes getting fired up with each foul he seems to get because he is so crucial to this team. But we saw Marvin Bagley shine at the 5 with Richaun Holmes in foul trouble in this last meeting with the Sixers. But you mentioned Marvin Bagley. He's played 24 games, and this is the longest stretch he's gone healthy in his career. And of course, we don't want to jinx anything, but he has been shining and turning out pretty impressive performances, helping this team win, helping this team get going at some point. But of course, we have some of the best in the league that this team is going to face. But they have been showing out and performing well in these last 3 weeks in particular. But what are you most encouraged by so far?
I'm probably right there with you with just the fight that they've shown. The defense is looking like it exists again, which is something that we weren't saying when the season started. They're playing with pride and purpose on the defensive end. It is gang rebound mentality. It is gang defense mentality. As my alarm goes off, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I think also, and I have to be a little. I mean, I'm trying to be as objective as possible here, because I know people are really thrilled with the way the team is competing and playing, but they're also catching some breaks. I mean, no Paul George in that Clippers game. You find some breaks here and there. Orlando's coming in. They're not going to have Aaron Gordon. Not that he was much of a factor the last time they played Orlando on the road trip. So, hey, you got to play what's put in front of you. That's no fault of their own. Everyone's going to go through it. So if they can gather some of these wins, I still am a little bit hesitant to believe that this is what we're seeing. I think at the end of the day, I've kind of said it for the past few weeks, which is maybe at best they're just a 500 basketball team. But even if that's the case, that goes a long way, because even at best, if they are a 500 basketball team, I consider that to be a major accomplishment. Now we have to start talking about, what does the rest of this month look like? You still have a little bit over a month before the trade deadline comes up. Are you going to be a buyer? Are you going to be a seller? Do you try to compete? Do you build to try to make a run? Do you try not to mess with it? Do you kind of think that things are going to be as is, or do you still look to your future? Those are decisions that have to be made. I still don't think you have enough of a sample size, but so far so good. I think Kings fans should be really enthusiastic and excited about what they have in front of them. And it's the question I asked Luke Walton, because they've been playing like this for better part of a week now, 2 weeks for most part, and they've been able to rattle off wins. Now, how does each guy talk about it? Each guy's different. Each player is different in the way that they look at the success. Some of these guys are really, really excited for the success that they have. Others are a little more subdued. They've been here, done that, and realize that they haven't accomplished a hell of a lot yet. So that's what I was kind of asking Luke Walton before the game against the Sixers the other night. I was like, how do you want them to look at the success? Do you celebrate this, or do you want them to realize, no, you ain't done anything yet? So how do they respond? And I think they responded the right way. How do they respond to this? The one thing is seeing Kings fans. I mean, we see them, they're vocal on Twitter. That's great. They're vocal on social media. They get excited. They should get excited, but you kind of almost have to curb the enthusiasm a little bit and say, okay, what now? And, before that Sixers loss, they were up to 7th in the West. And I think everyone was thrilled with that, and they should be, but one loss and you're already back down to 9 or 10. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Let's see what this homestand holds, because this homestand, as much as I kind of thought it might be, really the road trip coming up. I mean, you take these 10-game increments and see how they kind of play out.
Yeah, as we've talked about, it's a top-heavy Western Conference. But hey, as long as you get into the 10th seed this year with the play-in situation, looking ahead to the playoffs, I think the Kings will be in good position. We saw them fall apart in the bubble, of course, when they had a chance to kind of make that run. But now that they've kind of revamped and implemented this new play-in system for this upcoming postseason, it could be an opportunity for the Kings to end this now season-long drought. But again, they've got a long road ahead of them. And I think the last time since we saw our audience and viewers, we were freshly talking about Tyrese Halliburton being named Rookie of the Month for his first 17 NBA career performances. But now we're seeing De'Aaron Fox get recognized as Player of the Week in the Western Conference. Giannis Antetokounmpo earned the honor in the East. And that's only fueling the fire of the All-Star conversation. We saw the latest results and votes come in. Klay Thompson, again, Alex Caruso getting hundreds of thousands of votes.
Right.
No shade to Alex Caruso, because we know what he was able to do when the Lakers needed him to. But I know, particularly in Sacramento, they're looking at that list and seeing these guys and saying, hey, De'Aaron should be there. And you've got Magic Johnson tweeting that De'Aaron Fox might not make it, but he should, because he is performing at a high level. We've heard, his teammates talk about he was practicing at an all-star level when training camp opened, and now we're seeing these 30-point performances. Again, fourth quarter Fox, leading the team in assists as he should at that position as well. But just the way that he's been putting this team on his back, particularly in the fourth quarter, is something that the league is now recognizing. We've seen it, the fans know it, but again, we have to talk about this potential for De'Aaron Fox to slide into the all-star conversation, or list rather, roster in the Western Conference, which is so tough to do at his position.
Yeah, you're a small market team. You don't have some of these guys, if you look at it too, they've been on several teams, so they kind of get a little bit of those fan bases to vote. Look, you're a Kings player. You have to be a generational talent or someone who has a huge following from a different team when you come to Sacramento. It's, Kings are cellar dwellers for the majority of these years. So you don't
for
have
most of these players' lifetimes.
Yeah,
let's make that clear. Tyrese Halliburton hasn't seen this team in the playoffs since he was maybe 4 years old, maybe if that. And again, he's competing for this team that's trying to end that streak.
And you also get a lot of international votes. So if you're not super popular internationally in China and India and overseas, I mean, that's going to be tough. So yeah, I mean, look, seeing Alex Caruso crack the top 10 in guards in the West, he's a Laker. He should. I mean, again, that's an incredible.
He should.
For fan voting, yeah, I expect it because look, that's a Lakers team. Lakers are like the Yankees in baseball. They have a global following. The Kings would like to think they have a global following, but in comparison to the Lakers, sorry, you don't. So
I would rival to say that the Lakers don't have as many Serbian fans or people from Greece tuning in and watching these games, which we know the Kings
maybe. Well, yeah, historically, sure. Now they've got one Serbian player that doesn't play. So they're I mean, I'm with you. They've built up a fan base in some of these places, but compared to the Lakers, I mean, you got a long way to go. So yeah, you're not going to get the votes. And look, the way the All-Star votes are set up, look, and people, I think Kings fans know it's not going to be the fan vote, and that's fine. It's going to rely on the coaches. So do they reward winning or not? I end up coming off as a hater. All I'm saying is I don't expect De'Aaron Fox to make the All-Star team. No one asked me if he should. Like they always say, do you think he'll make it? And I go, no, because of the way.
Should he? Do you think he should?
He is putting up numbers worthy of an All-Star. Absolutely. That's undeniable. Even from what this conversation we had a week ago, where even what he's done over the past week, which again, and I look like a hater, but when someone posed he could be player of the week. And I said, yeah, he very well could be. But did you see what Steph Curry's doing? I think it helps too that that's a league award, and Steph Curry has probably like 60 player of the week awards in his repertoire, and De'Aaron is a little bit of new blood there. Plus De'Aaron went undefeated. He had a winning record at that time. And I think Steph was 2-2 during those games last week. But I mean, Steph was putting up ungodly numbers, incredible numbers. Not that Fox didn't. I mean, look, but the conversation you and I had a week ago, if you take that and now to where we are today, Fox has taken another incredible leap. You're talking about in his past 6 games, 4 30-point performances from a guy that doesn't score. I mean, isn't that type of scorer. He's a scorer, but he's not that type of scorer. He's not known as a 30-point scorer. So I think he's taken another leap, but all the while he's scoring, he's also playing good defense. He's also racking up assists. So yeah, he's playing like an all-star. That doesn't change. Them being 500 will certainly help, but the coaches don't vote until the 23rd. So next Wednesday, and I'm doing off the top of my head, so bear with me, internet trolls. Next Wednesday, we will know the starters. It'll be announced on Thursday, but that's a fan vote. So then you have a whole nother week before the coaches will release the results. So maybe they do it on the 21st or the 20th, whenever they have to have their vote in by, it's announced on the 23rd. That's when we'll know if De'Aaron Fox has made it as an all-star reserve. In order for that to happen, in my opinion, they need to be hovering at 500 or have a winning record, because coaches are going to reward winning. So from that, if they're 500, let's say going into the 19th or 20th, I think he's got a pretty good shot. And I never thought I would say that. But again, will he be an all-star? Probably not. So get your head. Will he be snubbed? again, if you're rewarding winning, well, then no, you're not being snubbed. I mean, look at Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell, by the way, who in fan voting wasn't even, he might not have even been in the top 10. Maybe he was, but he was pretty low. Now he's up to like fourth in guards. So again, Utah Jazz having the best record in the league is helping that. Like Donovan Mitchell should be an all-star. Mike Conley, you could make an argument, might be an all-star. I don't know that the Lakers get another all-star outside of LeBron and AD. I don't think you're going to see a guard in there. I don't think the Clippers will have another guard outside of Kawhi, maybe Paul George. Paul George has been out. You've seen, Steph will be there. Luka's going to be there. Damian Lillard's going to be there. Look at your Phoenix Suns, who are unbelievable right now. Who would have ever thought they were going to be up to fourth in the West? They just knock off the Bucks the other night. We knew, I was talking about Devin Booker, as I've been critical of Booker. He's an all-star. Is Chris Paul? You could make an argument. I mean, Chris Paul's been one hell of a player this year. Will he get rewarded by coaches as a legacy player? Maybe, maybe not. So then where's De'Aaron going to make it? You basically get, and again, top of my head, you're basically getting two reserve guards, and then you get another player that could fit a forward, a big man, whatever. It could be another guard. So how does he get in? I don't know. But if you're a winning record going into maybe that weekend, that 19th, 20th, whatever, then yeah, maybe he can get in. I just don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, well, let's just run through the schedule to see if even a 500 record is possible right now. As I said, they're 12-12 right now. They got Orlando coming here. They already picked up a win on the road over them. Memphis, again, same situation. Then you got the Nets next Monday. Then Miami, 1 point loss in the Kings have won 7 of their last 10, but up until, going into the game against the Sixers, they'd only lost one game by 1 point, and that was to the Eastern Conference champions on the road on a 3-game, I think that was their 3rd game in 4 nights situation on that road trip. And then that's just the homestand, right? And then you got the Bulls, the Bucks, and the Nets again, then the Knicks on the 25th. So
Bulls and Bucks back-to-back, right?
Bulls and Bucks on a back-to-back, yes. So
you got to win that Bulls game. Got to win that game.
You have to, yes. And for those keeping track at home, I picked the Kings to win 15 games in this first half, and they're already 3 wins shy of reaching that mark. And I definitely think there are still a couple winnable games left on the schedule based on what we've seen this team do in this recent stretch of 2 or 3 weeks, I would say.
Yeah, and I'd say, I mean, I always kind of cringe at that winnable game mark, because really all these games are winnable. But yeah, I look at it as more as, are there games that you should win? Orlando is a should win tomorrow night, tomorrow. I don't remember what day it is. Pandemic. They should win tomorrow night against Orlando. I think they should beat Memphis at home. Memphis hasn't been playing all that well. I think De'Aaron Fox is going to be looking forward to that game based off some, preseason chatter about, De'Aaron Fox and Ja Morant, and people thinking that Ja Morant is who De'Aaron Fox thinks he is.
Oh, no. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But, who's player of the week this week?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and he's got that in his bag, and that's fantastic. First time that's happened to him, but Ja Morant was the reigning rookie of the year. And I mean, we'll see how that plays out. So yeah, I think they should be able to finish out the homestand that way. Then you go on the road, you got to win that Bulls game. You're probably not going to beat the Bucks, especially on the second night of a back-to-back. So I don't think anybody would be too shocked to see that happen. So yeah, if you can go 3-1 in that stretch, you set yourself up pretty nicely before that even road trip moves on. Again, next Thursday, the starters will be announced. Regardless of what De'Aaron Fox says about wanting to, or at least should the game be played, I think he definitely wants to see himself as an all-star, represent his team the right way, and he's the best guy to do it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Ja Morant, the reigning rookie of the year, but we might have the upcoming rookie of the year here in Sacramento, barring any injury or anything, catastrophic happening. What we've seen out of Tyrese Halliburton in these handful of games in his first, season in the NBA. How do you feel about that prospect? Obviously, he's the rookie of the month along with LaMelo, who is probably the most buzzed about rookie so far in the national media. But, jumping out with some crazy predictions, way too early predictions. Do you think Tyrese Halliburton has a legit shot to be this year's rookie of the year based on what you've seen?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know that he'll get it because LaMelo is, I mean, not to say that Tyrese isn't fun to watch, but he's garnering that national attention, like you said, and I think he's worthy of it. I mean, LaMelo has really turned a corner here over the past couple weeks. Not to say that Tyrese hasn't. Look, Tyrese has he's not going to be this big scorer, although we are seeing a couple 20-point efforts of late. He's definitely shown that clutch gene as Luke Walton has talked about, but he makes everyone around him better. So does LaMelo. So yeah, whether Tyrese gets it or not, to me, doesn't really matter. Like I think even if LaMelo gets Rookie of the Year, and it doesn't take away from the impact Tyrese has had on this team. I think Kings fans would much rather say we would love, and I think Tyrese would say the same thing. We would much rather see this team compete for a playoff spot, make the playoffs, and LaMelo Ball can have the Rookie of the Year. The interesting part was did he have that mindset coming into the season? He talked about wanting to be Rookie of the Year, but now he's talking about wanting to get to the Kings to the playoffs. So that's the stuff you want to hear. How much does he believe that? I think he actually does. But right around the draft that he wanted to be Rookie of the Year. That was a goal of his. And I think it is a good goal to have. I remember the Kings haven't had a Rookie of the Year since Tyreke Evans, I believe. Cuz wasn't Rookie of the Year. So I just think I remember that Tyreke Evans Rookie of the Year chase. The team was awful. I mean, just absolutely terrible. 17 wins, I believe, that season. And everything, the only thing you could hold your hat on was like Rookie of the Year. Tyreek's gonna be Rookie of the Year. That's the promising. And what did end up happening? Tyreke has come back as a veteran for a second stint with the Kings just a few years ago. Tyreek's out of the league right now with a drug suspension. So I mean, he hasn't won anything, so not to say that Tyreke hasn't been a good player, but it's just one of those cautionary tales. Like, it doesn't really mean anything. So yeah, to see Tyrese do what he's doing and making people better. And I said this on the radio the other day. I said, man, watching Tyrese play, you and I think both agree with this. Every single game, he has a moment or two that just makes you go, wow. I mean, it's just incredible stuff that you've seen from a rookie with that much poise to have the swag he does. You could make those shorts a little longer, though.
Well, I mean, if they're going to keep producing these kinds of performances, I'm not going to mess with the length of the shorts or how many times they're rolled up, because if they're touching the knees, and that means you go 0 for 7 from outside, then keep them rolled up, man.
And at least he's wearing shorts, unlike Joel Embiid trying to check in the other day.
I don't know what was happening there, but, we're going to just go ahead and trust the process, because he had, 25 and 17 after that. So yes, Tyrese Haliburton, I mean, he's saying all the right things. We've heard Michael Malone just kind of rave about him in that loss, saying, he's given us hell in these first 3 games. The Kings go 3-0 against the Western Conference, runner up, and you got this 20-year-old kid working your guys. I mean, it's quite impressive. And to hear his teammates, to hear Luke Walton, to hear other coaches rave about him, the sauce is real, and he's, again, one of these guys who's, as much praise as he's receiving, as much national attention. I mean, he's already doing podcasts with JJ Redick and doing the whole thing. To get this team back to the playoffs is where his mind is at, and to be part of this collective unit to make that historic moment. I mean, it's somewhat history at this point for the Kings to crack the postseason. I remember when we were talking about even the bubble and the prospect of them getting the play-in game, I think you said that even if the Kings made it to a play-in in the bubble, we would consider that a postseason appearance, with the 10th seed being included in that play-in for this upcoming season as we know it now. Do you think that would be considered cracking the postseason for this team? Would you hang your hat on saying they made it to a play-in for the postseason? We're going to say that they made it to the playoffs, or that the drought is at least over at this point?
I don't know if the drought would be over. I mean, I personally would consider it, because even being in the discussion, I mean, those are playoff games down the stretch. That's essentially what the playoffs are. It's not a series. But yeah, I mean, personally, just from the mindset of making the playoffs, yes. But statistically, would I consider it a playoff appearance? No, like, you got to be in that top 8. So top 8 would be playoffs. But I mean, again, who knows if you make that, again, that would be a taste of the playoffs. That's what the playoffs would be. So from that standpoint, I'd say these guys have playoff experience at that point. So, I mean, that's all semantics, I guess, but being in the playoff discussion, 7, 8, 9, 10, with the play-in scenario out there, I mean, that means you're playing essentially playoff basketball in the final month of the season, especially against opponents that are vying for a home court advantage, vying for different placement within the Western Conference. Maybe you see a team like the Lakers, the Clippers, who knows if the Utah Jazz are still atop the West like they are right now. Maybe they come down a couple notches, but see what happens within those. Maybe you have some guys that rest at that point, but doesn't matter. I mean, they got to still go full speed, and at that point, it's going to be playoff games. So if they're within the conversation, that's going to go a long, long way.
Yes, well, in order to get to the conversation, they need to close out the second half of the season, which they've struggled to do in the last few years. Again, I mentioned the All-Star break, the trade deadline is kind of the moments that really either shook or helped propel this team. Last year, we saw the All-Star break kind of propel this team into some winning basketball. And then, of course, the pandemic halted that. But 2 years ago, when we saw, the likes of Iman Shumpert and Justin Jackson traded, that really took this team off the rails as they were kind of becoming a playoff team. And now we're hearing a guy that's kind of the glue guy, Harrison Barnes, being thrown around in conversations for potential trades, specifically with the Boston Celtics. What do you think? I think that would totally take this team out of its funk. I mean, for me, again, if I'm a fan, if I'm somebody who's yearning to see a postseason appearance, trading Harrison Barnes is not going to help you get there. And now that you are, again, flirting with the 8th seed, but knowing that the 10th seed will at least get you in, and you're performing the way you are against quality opponents, and again, to see the way that Harrison Barnes is having a career year,
right,
and again, just stepping up in ways that you need a veteran, especially a wing, to do.
Well, and to that point, Lena, I mean, that's how delicate the season is. I mean, when they had lost 9 of 11, are you thinking that? Now, granted, you're thinking, okay, Harrison Barnes is having a fantastic year, but the season's probably doomed. These guys are going the other way.
I don't think it's doomed because we're only a fourth of the way into the season at this point. And really, again, you're as we've seen in the last 10 games, your team could take a turn very quickly, and then suddenly you've got more to play for.
Well, and what I mean by that is, okay, let's say they would lose 9 of 11 again from like this moment forward. Already knowing that they had lost 9 of 11 at one point, then they turn around, rattle off 6, 7 of 8, something like that. What if all of a sudden now they lose 9 of 11? I know these are what ifs, but that just kind of shows the fragility to the season, because there's 3 things you're looking at if you're trading anybody, which is, does it make us better right now? Can we make that run to the playoffs? Is this going to help excel that process? Do we look to just dump salary, which Harrison would be a considerable dump of salary, or do we look to help our future, which is another first-round pick, maybe a first-round pick from this last year's draft, whatever going forward? I mean, that's the good thing about Sacramento is they're in a really comfortable spot right now. They have a lot of expiring deals. They have obviously big money that's already for De'Aaron kicking in next year. Buddy's kicked in this year. And Harrison has already had big money, although his kind of comes down the mountain a little bit. It's not an escalating deal. But you have all of your picks. And that's what's really set Monty McNair, is when you look at this franchise that he took over, is how flexible will we be going forward? And I think they're in a pretty good scenario for that. You don't want to max out all your contracts just to battle for the 8th seed. So, it's going to be really interesting, because I think when a lot of focus is on Harrison Barnes, and I think there are teams that look at him as a very attractive piece right now that maybe a year ago they didn't, because the contract was really kind of awful. But the one guy that is kind of similar, like if I'm the Celtics, for example, because that's the one that's out there, we're kind of kicking around, is like the Celtics and Harrison Barnes. That's kind of the one that's been out there. And as far as I've been able to gather, like maybe there's been a conversation, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. Now that could change days from now, who knows? But if I'm the Celtics, I'm not looking at Harrison Barnes. I'm looking at Nemanja Bjelica, a guy who isn't being used, who's an expiring contract, who's also a stretch 4, who also can help my team now, like make a playoff push. So to me, that makes more sense, especially if you're the Celtics. Now, are you giving up a first-round pick for Bjelica? Well, probably not. Like, why would you do that? But if I'm the Celtics also, and there's been a report out there that maybe it's Aaron Nesmith, who was the 14th pick of last year's draft, and you saddle that with another first-round pick, well, essentially you're giving up 2 first-round picks for someone like Harrison Barnes. Again, if you're the Celtics, why are you doing that? Like, that doesn't make sense. If I'm the Kings, they're giving up, sure, I'll do it, even at the expense of making a playoff run right now. So those are those conversations that you have. I don't know so much that it's on Harrison. I think it's you see some of these other expirings. Maybe it's a Jabari Parker who hasn't played all year. Maybe it's a Corey Joseph who is playing, but maybe you want more playmaking and shooting from that position as opposed to the defense and glue guy that he provides. I don't know. There's going to be some interesting possibilities, but I think they become more interesting the more they win. And if they're, going into March 1st, if they're a winning record, that's where I think fans are going to look at this and go, well, we expect you to make that move that's going to punch us into the 8th seed. And that's going back to what Vlade did. The weird thing about that Shumpert trade was they were trying to make that move and getting Harrison Barnes to push them to the playoffs. It had an adverse effect and totally killed chemistry because no one really could. You can't put a stat on chemistry, right? Like that's just the analytic you don't have. And it totally, as you know, screwed this team up. And they were a losing team at that point, and they lost any of that mojo that they had. So it's so delicate, man. The season can be so delicate.
Yes, and with Monty McNair in his first year here, I'm very curious to see what kind of moves he makes. Obviously, this was his first draft. He hit the jackpot with landing Tyrese Halliburton, as we've seen, but it's going to be interesting. I've noticed him sitting courtside with Vivek, and they kind of lean over with their masks. Can't see what they're saying, but they're talking about someone, something, and who knows what those conversations are going to be like as we look ahead to the March 25th trade deadline. But this is going to be a very interesting stretch for the Kings as they close out this first half. Right now, they're sitting right at 500, right outside the threshold of the 8th seed, which would typically be the marker for the playoffs. But things could happen between now and May, and I'm really excited to see how this team performs. I mean, it's like an ebb and flow of success and despair, and just. You never know which team is going to come out. As we heard Luke Walton say, they were pretty tired in that Sixers game. You saw some members of the second unit being used a little bit more. Kyle Guy is getting some more time as we've seen this kind of grueling schedule play out the way it has. But first, they got to get past this Magic team here on Friday. And I'm interested in seeing how they bounce back. I think they'll be able to get the win over this team and go 2-0 against Orlando. What do you think?
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting. I mean, I think you have to expect that. I think you got to close this homestand off. I think losing to, even if you split, I think that's going to be disappointment. You got to win both these games. And hey, it's Valentine's Day on Sunday. So, show some love and get a win.
Yeah, maybe Buddy Love will show out to live up to his nickname there as they host the Memphis Grizzlies on Sunday. And Sunday will be a week out since the NFL season came to an end. We talked about it with our audience here, so I figured we might as well bring it some closure. We were right. Tampa Bay, Tom Brady.
He looked like he had a good day. He had a good day yesterday.
He had a good day yesterday. I don't know how many strawberries he consumed, but it looked like he was having a great time. Way too much sugar. He was definitely on a sugar high out there on the boat, but a dominant win. I don't think, we talked about it obviously on Toyota Sports Extra on Sunday, but neither of us really predicted that kind of lopsided result with what we've seen from Patrick Mahomes. I hope he's enjoying his time off with his wife and mom to be and getting some much needed rest because homeboy was running for his life all over the field at Raymond James Stadium. And then we saw the Weeknd kill it on Raymond James Stadium. My favorite part was the use of the field for the halftime show. Not one that I'm going to be running back probably as much as I did J-Lo and Shakira or Lady Gaga or any of the previous ones, but it was not a bad production. Jasmine Sullivan and Eric Church could have done without the Eric Church personally.
I thought her was the highlight to me. Vallejo, go her.
Absolutely. But yeah, Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers, shout out to Bruce Arians and his staff, making history to close out this wild NFL season. And as we continue this wild NBA season, again, we'll continue to bring you the latest on the Kings here in Sacramento, looking to end this, 15 years now? Going on 16 years since they've made the postseason. Too
long. Unbelievable.
But we'll bring you the latest trade talks, accolades for your favorite players. We'll be talking all about it every week here on Kings Talk. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, L Washington TV, Sean Cunningham. Check us out on ABC 10 in Sacramento. We got Toyota Sports Sector every Sunday night at 11:35, so you can watch us talk more about the Kings and all of the latest sports happenings. And we'll see you next time here on YouTube for more Kings Talk. See you then.